There's a woman in California who hasn't bought a single flower for her porch in 6 years. Not one. Her neighbors spend $200 every spring at the garden center, replanting the same pots over and over. And she just watches the same plants wake up every April for free. She's not lucky. She's not some secret master gardener. She just knows something most people never get told at the garden center. Almost none of the flowers they sell you in those little plastic pots in spring are supposed to die every winter. The garden centers just don't tell you which ones survive, because if you knew, you'd stop coming back every single year. Today, that stops. In this video, I'm giving you 10 perennials that live happily in containers and come back bigger and better every single year. No digging, no replanting, no yearly shopping trips. We're going deep on each one: how to plant it, how to actually keep it alive through winter in a pot, and the one mistake that kills 90% of them. And I'm saving the best for last. Number 10 is a plant most Americans have never even heard of, and once you see what it does in a pot, you will never look at your front porch the same way again. Before we get into item number 1, quick thing. I add new plant once, done forever videos almost every week because there are dozens of these budget-saving perennials most garden centers never mention. And honestly, if you miss the ones I've already covered, you could be spending money on plants you didn't need to buy at all. So hit subscribe now and turn on notifications, because next week's video could save you the exact plant you were about to overpay for this spring. Okay, let's get into it. Item 1. Hosta, the shade pot that refuses to die. Hostas are one of the toughest perennials on this entire list, and almost nobody puts them in containers, which is honestly a crime because they thrive there. In the ground, hostas can get eaten alive by slugs and deer. In a raised pot off the ground, both problems practically disappear overnight. You just need a container at least 14 inches wide and deep, because hostas build a thick root mass over the years, and they'll tell you when they're cramped by getting smaller instead of bigger. The trick with hostas in pots is winter. In the ground, the soil around the roots never fully freezes solid because the earth insulates it. In a pot, the roots are exposed on all sides to freezing air, which can kill them if you're in zone 5 or colder. The fix is simple. Push the entire pot against your house's foundation wall for winter, or wrap the pot in bubble wrap, or bury the whole pot in a spare garden bed up to its rim. Any of those 3 tricks and your hostas sails through winter like nothing happened. What most people don't know is that hostas planted in containers actually experience less disease than hostas planted in the ground, because container soil drains faster and the leaves stay drier, and most hosta fungal problems come from wet leaves sitting in humid, still soil. But hostas are the safe pick on this list, a plant almost anyone can guess belongs here. Item number 2 is a plant most people think only survives in warm states, and I'm about to show you why that's completely wrong. Item 2. Coral bells. Heuchera. Color without a single flower. Coral bells might be the most underrated container perennial in America because people assume they're a pretty but fragile plant, something you buy for spring color and toss in fall. That assumption is exactly backwards. Heuchera is rated hardy down to zone 4, and it's actually the ruffled, colorful leaves, not the flowers, that make it worth growing, in shades of purple, amber, lime green, and near black, all sitting in the pot from March through December. The secret with coral bells in containers is planting depth. This is the single most common way people accidentally kill this plant. Heuchera has a woody crown that sits right at soil level, and if you bury that crown even half an inch too deep, the plant will slowly rot from the center out over the following year. It looks healthy in fall and then just doesn't come back in spring, and nobody understands why. Plant it so the crown sits slightly above the soil line, not buried, and it will outlive the pot itself. Here's the surprising fact. Coral bells is actually a native North American woodland plant, meaning it evolved growing in thin, rocky forest soil, which is exactly why it's perfectly suited to the tight, well-drained conditions of a container. It's arguably more at home in a pot than it ever was in a garden bed. Item 3 on this list is one where I want you to actually pause for a second and think about your own yard for a moment, because what I'm about to tell you value might change how you've been watering this plant your whole life. Quick pause before we go further. Be honest with me. How many pots have you personally thrown away or emptied out every single fall just because you assumed the plant inside was done? Drop that number in your head right now. If it's more than 0, you've probably spent money you didn't need to. That's exactly why I genuinely appreciate a subscribe here, because the whole point of this channel is making sure you never throw away a living plant again by accident. All right, let's keep going. Item 3. Sedum Autumn Joy, the drought-proof pot filler. Sedum is the plant garden centers wish they could stop selling as an annual because people keep buying it fresh every year without realizing it's basically indestructible. This is a succulent family perennial, meaning it stores water in its thick leaves, which is why it can survive weeks of a forgotten container without wilting, something almost no other flowering perennial in this list can do. In pots, Sedum actually performs a full 3-season show. Fleshy green rosettes in spring, broccoli-like flower buds by midsummer, and then a deep rusty pink to bronze flower head in fall that lasts well into November, turning almost copper-colored as the weather cools. Because it thrives on neglect, the single biggest killer of potted sedum isn't cold, it's overwatering combined with poor drainage, which rots the roots long before winter even arrives. If your pot has good drainage holes, sedum can handle winters down to -30 degrees Fahrenheit, completely untouched, needing 0 winter protection at all. The fact almost nobody knows, sedum flowers are one of the single best late-season food sources for monarch butterflies migrating south, meaning this lazy pot plant is quietly doing more for pollinators in September and October than almost anything else blooming in your yard. Number 4 is where things get personal, because this next plant is the one plant on this entire list that most people have already killed at least once without even knowing why. Item 4. Lavender, Munstead or Hidcote variety, the pot that smells like money saved. Lavender has a reputation problem. People think of it as a Mediterranean plant that can't survive an American winter, so they treat it like a disposable annual every year, which is a $15 per pot mistake repeated for a decade. The truth is that Munstead and Hidcote varieties are hardy to zone 5, and they're perfect for containers because lavender actually prefers the fast-draining, slightly poor soil that pots naturally provide, versus the rich, moisture-retentive soil most people put in garden beds. The number 1 killer of potted lavender isn't cold, it's wet roots sitting in soggy potting mix over winter. Lavender roots rot within weeks if they sit in moisture, so the fix is to mix in extra perlite or coarse sand, about 30% of the total pot volume, so water runs straight through instead of pooling. Combine that with tucking the pot against a south-facing wall for winter, and lavender will come back thicker and more fragrant every single year, eventually needing a light pruning each spring just to keep its shape. Here's the surprising fact. Lavender actually gets more fragrant and produces more essential oil the tougher and drier its conditions are, meaning babying it with rich soil and frequent watering, the instinct most people have, actually produces a weaker smelling plant than slight neglect does. Item number 5 is the plant I get asked about more than any other on this entire list, and the answer surprises almost everyone. Item 5. Daylily, Stella d'Oro variety, the pot that blooms for months, not weeks. Most flowering perennials give you 2, maybe 3 weeks of bloom before going green and quiet for the rest of the season. Stella d'Oro daylilies are the exception. This compact variety can rebloom continuously from late May through September if you deadhead the spent flower stalks, giving you nearly 5 months of golden yellow blooms from one single planting. In a container, daylilies form a dense, fibrous root mass, which actually works in your favor. It means the plant is nearly impossible to kill through underwatering, since that thick root system stores moisture reserves most other perennials simply don't have. The one real risk in a pot is winter heaving, where repeated freeze-thaw cycles slowly push the shallow crown up and out of the soil over a few years. The fix takes 10 seconds. Each spring, just check whether the crown is sitting proud of the soil line, and if it is, top dress with an inch of fresh potting mix to tuck it back in. The fact most people don't know, the flower buds of daylilies daylilies are completely edible and have been used in Asian cuisine for centuries, meaning this lazy pot plant is quietly also a food source most American gardeners walk past every single day without realizing it. We are halfway there, and item number 6 is where I need you to stop and actually answer a question honestly. Real talk for a second. Think about the pot sitting on your porch right now, or the one you're planning to fill this spring. Are you about to fill it with something that dies in October out of pure habit? That single habit is the exact reason garden centers make their money every spring. If you want to break that habit for good, subscribing genuinely helps, because I build these lists specifically to replace buy every year habits with plant once ones. And there are still 5 more coming in this video alone. Let's keep moving. Item 6. Catmint, the pollinator magnet that never quits. Catmint is often confused with its cousin catnip, but Nepeta fascinii, the ornamental garden variety, is a completely different plant built for container performance. It produces a soft mound of gray-green foliage covered in small lavender-blue flower spikes from late spring through frost, and unlike most perennials, a single hard trim in midsummer triggers an entirely fresh second bloom cycle, effectively doubling your flowering season from one plant. In pots, Catmint is remarkably forgiving of erratic watering because its roots are adapted to dry, rocky conditions in the wild. The real key to keeping it alive for years rather than just one season is that midsummer haircut, cutting the entire plant back by about half once the first flush of blooms fades. Skip that step and the plant gets leggy, flops over the edge of the pot, and looks tired by August. Do it, and you get a second full flowering right through fall, with the plant returning fuller each spring as its root system matures underground. The surprising fact, catmint is one of the few ornamental perennials that deer and rabbits reliably avoid because of a natural chemical compound in the leaves called nepetalactone, the same compound that makes actual catnip appealing to cats, but repellent to nearly every browsing animal that raids a typical garden. Item 7 is the one I promised you earlier, and I meant it when I said it would change how you think about container gardening completely. Item 7. Creeping thyme, the living mulch most gardeners have never tried in a pot. Here it is, the plant I told you would change everything. Almost every gardening video treats creeping thyme as a ground cover for walkways between pavers. Almost nobody realizes it's one of the single best filler plants for the base of a large container, planted around the edges of a taller perennial like a daylily or hosta. It creates a dense, low mat that acts as a living mulch, shading the soil, locking in moisture, and choking out the weed seeds that blow into pots every spring. Creeping thyme is hardy to zone 4, drought tolerant once established, and it actually gets tougher and denser every year rather than declining, which is the opposite of what happens with most container plants over time. In early summer, it covers itself in tiny pink-purple flowers that pollinators, especially small native bees, absolutely swarm. Because it hugs the soil so tightly, it barely competes with the main plant in the pot for water or nutrients, meaning you effectively get 2 plants thriving in the space most people only use for one. The fact almost nobody knows, crushed creeping thyme releases the same aromatic compound found in culinary thyme, and it's genuinely edible and safe to use in cooking, meaning this decorative filler doubles as a low-key kitchen herb growing right there in your ornamental pot. Item 8 might be the single most budget-friendly plant on this entire list, and I want to show you exactly why in a second. Item 8. Yarrow, the pot plant that multiplies itself for free. Yarrow is one of the only plants on this list that doesn't just survive in a pot, it actively spreads and fills in more space every single year, meaning your one starter plant can eventually be divided into 3 or 4 separate pots without spending another dollar. It produces flat clusters of tiny flowers in yellow, pink, or red, atop feathery, almost soft fern-like foliage, blooming from early summer straight through fall, with minimal deadheading required. The trick to keeping yarrow thriving long-term in a container is division. Because it spreads through underground rhizomes, a pot-bound yarrow plant will eventually get congested and bloom less if left alone for more than 2 or 3 years. The fix is simple and actually turns into a bonus. Every third spring, pop the entire root ball out, split it into 2 or 3 sections with a garden knife, and repot each piece separately, instantly turning one aging plant into several fresh new ones, completely free. The surprising fact, yarrow has been used medicinally for over 1,000 years, historically applied to wounds to help stop bleeding. Its Latin name, Achillea, is a direct reference to the Greek myth of Achilles, who was said to have used the plant to treat his soldiers' battle wounds. We're almost at the end, but item number 9 might be the biggest money saver on this entire list, and here's why. Item 9. Russian sage. The shrub everyone wrongly assumes needs a garden bed. Most people see Russian sage at the garden center, assume it's a full-size landscaping shrub that needs to go straight into the ground, and walk right past it for container gardening. That assumption costs people money every year because Russian sage actually performs beautifully in a large pot, especially the newer compact varieties like Little Spire, which stay under 3 feet tall and produce the same silvery aromatic foliage and clouds of tiny lavender blue flowers from midsummer into fall. The key to Russian sage surviving winter in a container is knowing it wants the opposite treatment of most flowering plants. It actively prefers poor, dry, lean soil, and overly rich potting mix or too much fertilizer will actually make it floppy and shorten its lifespan. Cut it back hard in early spring, right before new growth emerges, rather than in fall, because the old woody stems left standing over winter actually help protect the plant's crown from freezing temperatures. The fact most people don't know, Russian sage isn't a true sage at all. It's not even in the same genus as culinary sage, and despite its tough woody appearance, it's actually a member of the mint family, which explains why its crushed leaves release such a strong, distinctive aroma. And now, the one I promised you at the very beginning of this video. Number 10 is here. Item 10. Virginia. Pig squeak. The almost unheard of perennial that blooms in snow. This is the plant I promised would change how you think about container gardening forever. And it's one that almost no American gardener has ever heard of, despite being wildly popular in European gardens for over a century. Virginia, nicknamed pig squeak because rubbing its thick leaves together produces a squeaking sound, has enormous, glossy, cabbage-like leaves that stay evergreen through winter in a pot, meaning your container isn't bare, brown dirt from November to March like almost every other plant on this list. It's genuinely something to look at all year long. In early spring, often while there is still snow on the ground, Virginia sends up thick stalks of deep pink to magenta flower clusters, blooming weeks before almost anything else in your yard wakes up. It's rated hardy to zone 3, meaning it survives conditions that would kill most container perennials outright. And because the leaves are thick and leathery, the plant is remarkably resistant to slugs, deer, and drought all at once, a combination almost no other plant on this entire list can claim simultaneously. The truly shocking fact, in fall and winter, Virginia's evergreen leaves don't just survive, they change color, turning deep burgundy red or bronze as temperatures drop, meaning this single plant gives you fresh green foliage in summer, vivid red foliage in winter, and bright pink flowers in earliest spring, essentially performing as 3 completely different plants across the year, from one single planting in one single pot forever. Look back at everything we just covered. Hostas surviving because pots keep them dry, lavender getting stronger the more you neglect it, yarrow multiplying itself for free, Virginia blooming through actual snow. Every single one of these plants breaks the same myth that a beautiful pot has to be rebuilt from scratch every spring. It doesn't. The garden industry profits from you believing containers are temporary. These 10 plants prove that a pot can be a permanent home, not a rental. You plant once, you adjust a little each year, and nature does the rest. for free for a decade or more. That's not a gardening trick. That's just information most people were never given. Before you go, tell me 2 things in the comments. What city or state are you gardening in, and which one of these 10 surprised you the most? I genuinely read every single comment, and it helps me know exactly what to cover next. If you liked this, my next video breaks down the 7 biggest mistakes killing your container plants before winter even arrives. And honestly, mistake number 4 is one almost every single person watching this is currently making right now. Subscribe so you don't miss it, because I'm not sure when I'll cover it again. Thanks for spending this time with me today. Now go give one of these 10 plants a real home. I'll see you in the next one.